Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome, adventurers. It's Cressup here, and today I've got a fantastic chat with the lovely Jake Rodkin, who is the co-founder of an indie studio called Campo Santo, which 10 years ago made a little game called Firewatch. Now, I'd also love to speak to Jake at some point about the other fascinating series he's worked on, The Walking Dead, Tales of Monkey Island, many other great things. He's just a very talented guy. I'd love to speak to him about all those other projects, but with it being the anniversary, we focus mainly on Firewatch, as well as talking a little bit about adventure games in general and storytelling as well. So it was a really great conversation. Thank you so much, Jake, for speaking to me about that. Of course, I was less able to obviously press very much on what he's doing currently at Valve. So, yeah, there's no real questions to that end, but we do have a lovely chat about Firewatch, which was exactly what I wanted to talk to him about. Please do drop this video a like and give me a subscribe if you like this kind of thing. This is what I do, speak to interesting people in the industry about the projects they make. You can also support me on my Ko-fi link below. If you like this stuff that I'm doing it all just for the fun of it. Do support me if you enjoy it. And follow me on Twitch as well. I'm twitch.tv/Cressup. On with the interview. So, Jake, thank you so much for having a chat with me. We're obviously going to be talking about Firewatch, which is turning 10 years old, which makes me feel
that's
very
too bad,
old.
but yeah, so it goes.
How do you feel when I say that? Firewatch is 10 years old.
I mean, I feel old. What?
I don't. I suppose I mean just in the sense. Yeah, I don't mean to be like, how does that make you feel? It's aged, but I mean more as in people we're even getting together to talk about the fact that that there is this anniversary and it's a game that sort of warrants people talking about its anniversary.
Oh, sure. I mean, besides it making me feel like a living skeleton, it is like
It's only 10 years. It's
it's
not that.
yeah, it's enough. It's enough. It's been a long 10 years since Firewatch came out, but
True.
no. The fact that people want to talk about it at all 10 years later is like it's humbling. It's also exciting. Like I don't know. You hope that 10 years after you put a game out, someone will want to talk to you about it. I don't even know if you hope that, but it happened, so it's very
Yeah.
nice. I'm just happy about it. I'm glad people are still enjoying the game.
And why do you think that is? What is it about Firewatch that has people still coming back to it? Because I mean, for example, I went to the Firewatch Reddit just to see, if anyone had any questions for you about this, and it was still, relatively active for like an indie game that's been out 10 years. What do you think it is about the game that's got people still wanting to play it and talk about it so much?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I can't answer for any individual person, and I think maybe part of the appeal to Firewatch is that it's a game that you can bring yourself to, and the game is sort of at a mechanical level interested in the input that you give it, and then tries to reply to you more than having it's a game with only one ending, and it's not a game that has, but it's also not a game that has. What am I trying to say? It's a game. It's a game that only has one ending, but it is a game with a bunch of choices, and also it's a game that tries to not judge you for those choices. It's a story that tries to be about regular people, tries to be in the place that we live, the planet Earth. I think that there's hopefully people can go into the game and just have an experience that feels unique to them, as much as they're also being told what is hopefully a pretty digestible mystery thriller story out in the middle of nowhere in a game that because Ollie and Jane and the rest of the folks who did art on it are just incredible. So you want to sit around and look at it. Also,
Yeah,
it
I
ended up
mean,
having a lot going for it.
yeah, it's an amazing looking game, and I think I was watching back some streams of people playing it at the time, and so many YouTubers are like, "Oh, this looks amazing," and I think that definitely is part of it, that the look and the sort of feeling of being outdoors and the kind of freedom. Even though, as you say, it kind of does only have one ending, but there is that feeling when you're going about the world and you're adding checkpoints to the map and things like that. You have that freedom that you would do normally when you're walking about in a forest in an open world like that.
Yeah, we Ollie, who was the art director, and Jane Eng, who was or sorry, Ollie Moss, who was the art director, and Jane Eng, who was the lead 3D artist on the game, really wanted the world to feel like to be evocative of like old national parks or old, American national parks posters, with which were sort of that romanticized screen printed look where everything sort of was layered in a bunch of sort of solid colors that go into the background, but somehow creates this pretty grandiose feeling. And then I did a lot of the level design work on the game, but also Nels Anderson, the game designer, and Sean Vanneman, the writer on the game, at least all of us were people who spent a lot of time outdoors and really wanted to try and create that feeling of, I mean, it's a romanticized outdoors. The map of Firewatch is like the size of the Disneyland resort or something. It's about 1 square kilometer, but we wanted it to feel like more. But the piece of it that we really wanted to get was, if you're out in a place for long enough, it starts off feeling sort of strange and mysterious and maybe 10 times bigger than it actually is. And then if you stay there for any amount of time, even if you're just out in a place camping for a few days, you eventually just know it really well, even though it's
Yeah.
just ostensibly a random chunk of nature. And we really wanted that, to try and give people that feeling of Firewatch of like, oh, I'm in a place that's kind of alienating. And then over just a few days, or in this case, a few hours, you start feeling comfortable with it. And, we'd hoped that players wouldn't need to use their map by the end of the game that often. Some people do, some people don't. Just like real people and real maps. The difference, of course, is that in this game, spoilers for Firewatch, a guy starts recording your conversations and punches you in the back of the head halfway through the game,
Yes.
which doesn't really happen usually. Hopefully, when you're just out backpacking somewhere.
No, you'd hope not. That's
Yeah.
quite worrying if that did happen. And Gone Home is a game I really love, and I feel the influences of that game a little bit in Firewatch. I mean, I know there is a little Easter egg in Firewatch where there's a book by the kind of fictional author who's featured in Gone Home, but
Yes.
I just wondered that with that idea of the kind of mystery in Firewatch, and you're not quite sure what kind of game is this? Is it a sort of conspiracy thriller game? Is it a romance? Did you always kind of set out to have those different elements in the game, or was it going to be one type and then it kind of grew into something more?
I think that the hope that it was a sort of mystery thriller drama with all of the sub genres that come from that were part of it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much any one element was intended to be prioritized over the other. I mean, I would say in early development, we were very excited about it's a mystery. It's a sort of isolationist thriller type of thing. I mean, we talked about the movie Moon quite a lot about
Oh,
that
yeah.
the Sam Rockwell movie where he's the only guy working on the moon, and but then weird things start happening. That feeling of being way out in the middle of nowhere somewhere, and when something goes wrong, you're not 100%. That feeling, the feeling of how you would deal with that when there's no one else there was a thing that or The Shining, another like
Yeah.
go to. We talked early on about things like, oh, we're going to let the player tear their tower apart and they're going to find a microphone hidden under the bed frame. And then we were like, there's 7 of us. There's no way we make a game that has that kind of thing in it. But the element of you being your only line of contact being Delilah, your manager in another tower, that was always basically in the game. I think I don't know. I mean, I think we all are sort of mystery, thriller, conspiracy story nuts, but we also wanted to try and make something that had the feeling of, you know, an adult drama, a piece of at least a piece of sort of modern genre fiction, which is part of why I think there's 1,000 goofy, not like, you know, there are some reasonably like high-minded design aspirations for Firewatch, but we also were
Yeah.
like, yeah, but it's also a story where a guy's listening to you over a radio and punches you in the back of the head. So filling the game with a bunch of like airport paperback thrillers was not an accident.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because that is another thing. A lot of people have been like, "Is there any meaning behind the books?" And obviously, there's some hints to other games, but obviously the numbers in the books and all that kind of thing. But
The
yeah,
numbers in the books was just I mean, we thought it was funny. Any book you can pick up, any book you pick up in Firewatch, Henry can put back on the bookshelf.
yeah,
And the crime by the numbers mystery series, it just seemed funny because there are those mystery authors that will just write, I mean, like the Sue Crafton alphabet books, or like um, Ollie was talking about an author who only writes mysteries involving jockeys and horse racing. So like you can get in these ruts, but it just seemed like a fun video game collectible
yeah.
thing to have one of those mystery series also be. If you really try, you can find all 10 of those books and you can stack them on the shelf in order. You don't get an achievement for it because you doing the job should be satisfying enough. But then we also made the seventh book be the movie adaptation cover so that it totally screws up your collection and you can't get the perfect match set.
Uh,
It just, I don't know. Is there a deeper thematic meaning? Maybe, but not to the numbers. I don't know. I think we were thinking some combination of, hey, we're kind of telling a story like this, but also
yeah.
this is the exact kind of books that you would find out there, and also, maybe there's something with like Henry and Delilah have been reading too many of them, but like I
Yeah. They're
wouldn't say
sort
that, I
of
wouldn't
getting
say
in that
there's
frame of
yeah,
mind, maybe.
they're definitely getting themselves in that headspace, but I wouldn't say there's any one direct like symbolic meaning behind any of that stuff. I
Uh,
saw someone post a huge it might have been a video essay about the fact that we included Jane Eyre, and it
yes.
was really exciting to read that analogy of Jane Eyre and how the events of the end of that book correlate to Firewatch, and we're like, okay, that's I wouldn't say that's why that book was in the
No.
game, but it
Why
was it
was
was
it in
awesome to
there?
see. I
Just.
I honestly couldn't say. I think that it was a book. I think we thought. I mean, at least one reason was it would be nice to get a couple of books from real life intermixed, and it was a public domain one that was also beloved by a couple members of the team. And then we saw someone's sort of textual analysis of the game that was this deep dive on the thematic resonance between that, and we're like, cool, that's
Yeah.
like totally
Yeah.
awesome that someone someone has found that connection, but not on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, I mean that is how these things go, though, isn't it? It takes on a life of its own. I mean, you talk about obviously you were a pretty small team making this, and I wonder whether some of the story beats maybe were kind of slightly down to do with that as well, such as you never do actually see Delilah, but is that I don't know. I wasn't sure if that was mainly coming from that or whether it was kind of always intended to be that way.
I mean, I think those things kind of go hand in hand. When
Yeah.
we set out to make the game, we knew about the size of team that we had. We knew the types of sort of skill sets that all of us were bringing to bear. We did our best guess to figure out how much sort of game content and tech could we build for this game. And very early on, before the story got very far, we thought, okay, you're just not going to see other people inside of this game. And can we
Yeah.
do like what story could we then tell in this setting with these characters and the themes that we like, where people hopefully won't miss not seeing other people. And then the end of the game ended up kind of being about in quotes you not seeing her. And but that there was never a time where we thought, oh, we're gonna have to cut Delilah's model and animation out of the game
Yeah.
because we don't have budget. It was more like, no, you're never gonna see her. But we had talked early on about maybe there's a chance that you have an encounter with the teens that's more close up, or maybe you meet a hiker. But they were just before anyone had even purchased a copy of a computer or a Unity license to make the game. Those were the sort of very early conversations about the types of encounters you could have in the game, or maybe how the game could be structured. But by the time we actually started pre-production on the game, we were already in a space of just, oh, it's going to be. If we say this is a thriller about an isolated person, let's lean into that as hard as absolutely possible,
Yeah.
given that it's already a tech requirement.
And in terms of like the beginning as well, it's a very simple way of setting it out, but it obviously you have to make these quite intense choices straight away. Was that kind of also similar? Because I think some people were maybe a bit thrown. They were like, oh gosh, it's more like a sort of visual novel element, and then it obviously goes into the full game,
Yeah.
as it were.
I think people have talked about this before, and I hope that I don't contradict the record on
Sure.
how
Yeah.
this came about. It's been 10 years though, so hopefully
Of
I get
course.
some
Yeah.
leeway.
This is the
But
thing. Yeah.
by my memory of how that all worked, we had initially talked about, like, in early days of creating this game, we had talked about opening it more in media res, where you just get slammed into Henry's perspective. We had talked about maybe one way we could show a character was show your face, but only in the mirror in the mornings. That was a very early idea we had for the
Ah.
game. So like there was a very early prototype of an opening where Henry is washing his face. People really wanted him to shave, which would be like the most expensive thing you could ever do. But have him like look himself in the mirror and say like, "Why are you out here?" And then you'd get to answer, "Why am I out here?"
Ah. Okay.
And we also just tried some, like, just start on day one of your first day on the job. And even with those situations, we found that we were making a game where we wanted players to be inhabiting this specific character of Henry, and players didn't know who Henry was and didn't know how much of themselves to bring to it, or when they were being asked to create who he was, when they were asked to lie. Like the example that we told ourselves was, let's say that Delilah gets flirty with you, and then if Henry just says, "Oh, I'm married," you're like, "Well, why didn't you tell me that I'm playing? I would have role played this differently if I had known the backstory
Right.
of this guy."
Okay.
And Sean had written an earlier version of that opening interactive fiction as something, he wrote it in Twine as a device just for the team to sort of get a sense of who this guy was. And when we played it, it was, I think, no individual's unique idea. I think it came across, it hit a bunch of people that, oh, maybe we should just be playing this. Maybe we should just put players through this. So we just sort of hand converted it from Twine into the Unity UI system. We didn't do anything fancy because it was the only
Yeah.
one of those that ran. And then we had the idea of intercutting that with Henry's hike out. So it sort of feels like a montage, where the game opens with the interactive fiction, but then it cuts to, I think, you in the elevator, the elevator door that opens, and you're in the parking garage for your apartment, and you throw your backpack in the truck, and
Yeah.
all those. The hope there was that sort of between the first person stuff and that sort of interactive fiction opening, that we could like weave players and Henry into the same headspace, so that when you pick up the radio for the first time and talk to Delilah, you're already experiencing and also having a little bit of ownership of the baggage that Henry's bringing in, so that when Delilah starts asking you questions, you're like, whoa, like
Yeah.
I just went through a lot, and you're already on my case about this, and
Yeah.
it ended up working really well. But that, I was very happy with how that thing turned out.
Yeah.
It was a kind of spicy choice, I guess, but also we thought, people will probably be into this. It's kind of like a character creator. It's kind of,
Yeah.
it's,
It
yeah.
is like
It
that.
was an unexpected little thing to throw at people when the first thing you're probably expecting to see is just the fire lookout tower in from the box. So having it also just open by saying you're in a bar in Colorado, I was like, okay, this is like, this turned out all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did. Yeah, and in terms of, and now obviously, I'm going to say yes, though there's spoilers in this interview, but it's 10 years of Firewatch. If you've not played it already, come on, what
If
is
you're
it?
saying there's
Yes.
spoilers now, bad news about all the other stuff we just talked
I'll say
about.
it at the beginning as well, but yeah,
Okay.
the ending wise, how did you sort of shop a couple of endings? Were you always thinking it's kind of got to be this way, and how do you feel about that ending? Because I know some people kind of get carried away with the grand kind of conspiracy of it. So when it comes down to what actually happens, they're almost a bit like, oh, okay. But it's a difficult one, really, because it was always obviously never going to be that kind of conspiracy route, is it? So,
No, I mean, we liked the idea that there is a person who's out there doing something,
yeah,
and he's doing something that is kind of bizarre, but that the characters have spun themselves up so hard that they actually start making it worse for themselves, and then the end of it is reality comes flooding back, and at least Delilah is like, I don't really want to see you or even think about this. Like, it's literally just making it worse. That some version of that was around for most of the existence of the story. it's funny. Whenever I think of the end of the game, I'm reminded of that Chris Remo, one of the designers, he's also the composer on the game.
Yeah.
He did a lot of programming and he did all sorts of stuff on there. Um, his like touchstone for the feeling for the end of the game was the end of Predator, the like Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, where
Okay.
they crash in this jungle and have this completely insane experience where their whole crew is wiped out, and then the end of it is them just getting airlifted away on a helicopter, being unable
Right.
to explain to anyone what happened or why their lives are
Yeah.
ruined, and they're just a bloody mess. And it just is like I think a close up of Arnold Schwarzenegger's face, and then a helicopter flies away, and that's the end of the movie. And he it was weird and funny to me that our touchstone was we should make this feel like the end of Predator, but we ended up very literally doing basically you get pulled into a helicopter and it flies away,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we leave you with nothing but questions. um, I'm still pretty proud of that and pretty happy with it. I
Yeah.
think, if in all honesty, if there was one piece of it that there's two. The two things that I would do differently, I guess, if I went back. I don't like saying that because I actually
Yeah.
don't think I wouldn't actually want to go and change the contents of the game, but I do think when you get to the research site in the game, it goes a little bit hard. Like the music is really intense, which we thought was really fun and funny when playing the game, and I think that it actually froths people up more than it should. And there's a little bit of a lack of clarity about, is this an actual research site and is this guy's hangout? There's little clues you can find throughout the game, but we didn't put them close enough to the critical path for most players to find them. So they're closer to things you have to get like a YouTube explainer for.
Sure.
That the research site is actually a university research project, and I think that it's like little bits of calibration like that. I think the other piece that makes the ending feel a little bit rushed in a way that doesn't always sit well with me. I'm just going to get into the details of Firewatch. So it goes. Is
Listen, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, it's true. There's a bit when you I just think that the end is a little bit overall more compact than I think
Mm.
we would have ultimately liked it to be. The dominoes start falling and then they fall very 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 quickly at the very end of the game. But whatever, it's all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think it did pretty well regardless. But yeah,
oh
sorry, what were you
sure,
going to say?
but oh no, just I do think that when people have that reaction to the ending, if for people for whom it does not sit well with them at first or ever, I think it might be a story structural thing where it's not actually the ending that they're bumping on, but the fact that the conspiracy stuff never quite untangled itself early enough, and that's
Sure.
like kind of a story nuts and bolts thing. But it's a thing I think about whenever I do see a Reddit post or a YouTube tells me that someone has an opinion about the game, which the
Yeah.
YouTube will tell me at all times.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I'm sure about that. But I think, I mean, it's also a credit to the game that like people got so invested in all these different elements, much almost like Henry, really. They sort
Sure,
of
yeah.
got really interested in all these different angles, and that's because the writing was so good and it brought people really well into that world. I mean, I guess in that case, were there elements that you just couldn't keep in, or the things that you had to take out just to keep it as aligned as you wanted, or within, I guess, a budget as well?
Yeah, all the stuff that we took out was relatively small. Ultimately, it was a lot closer to just the map works like the most lightweight Metroid game of all time, where you sort of get little tools that let you unlock it. And there were some places in the game where I think late game you wouldn't have had to backtrack quite as much. We really wanted to put in the bear den that the bear was in that Delilah keeps talking about.
Oh
But
yeah.
these were all just like there were just too few of us for how much time and budget we had to get those little things in. But I think by and large, most of the stuff we wanted to be in the game did end up in the game, which is it's rare, but is pretty exciting in hindsight. We did have a pretty different vibe for the third act of the game when we first finished it up, and then we had actually our publishers at Panic. We had the guys who own that company be the first two people to play test the entire game all the way through, and we sat and watched and realized, okay, the final third of this game doesn't play in a way that people like, because we had written it so that Henry and Delilah are sort of on the outs for the entire end of the game. Once Brian Goodwin's story starts showing up, they and oh once Delilah receives a call from another lookout saying that saying that someone claimed to be Henry and that they were framing them for the fire. I don't remember the exact
Right.
moment that happens there, but
Sure.
basically
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
when the research site burns down, in the earliest versions of the story, those two characters split. And we really liked the idea in the abstract of, oh, maybe Henry will be without his lifeline for a while. Maybe you're going to start panicking about Delilah. Maybe what's the game like when you're on your own? And it turned out that Firewatch when you're on your own is not fun,
Yeah.
because there's literally nothing to do or say or talk to anyone about. And it also made Delilah, it was an idea that on paper made a lot of sense, but then when we actually watched someone play through the game, it's actually, we thought that it would feel like the story was really coming together at that point, but it ended up feeling like it took this big crazy veer.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we rewrote the entire final third so that, she was still sort of getting overwhelmed with how much else was going on in her life, and her, the rest of her actual job was intruding because of the fire. So she has to be, you become one plate that she's spinning, but she doesn't just cut you off. She still
Yeah.
is in on the entire thing. And that change actually really helped, and made the ending feel more shored up. But so that wasn't a thing that we did or didn't exactly want to do, but it was definitely, I think, the biggest change that came in the making of the game, and that was because it was due to a playtest we did in the last few months of development.
And was it always going to be Cissy Jones for Delight? Like in terms of like kind of casting it, was it quite a simple process? Or?
Sean knew he wanted Cissy Jones be, since working with her on The Walking Dead season 1.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
She was Katya, Kenny's wife in the Walking Dead season 1 game that Sean and I made at Telltale, and that was a relatively small role. But I think Sean left that going, "Oh, Sissy is awesome, and we should use her in something." The search for Rich Summer as Henry was a way longer process. It was a complete. We had no idea what we wanted really, and we put out a pretty wide casting net. And then one of our programmers said, "Oh, I know." This Rich Summer from Mad Men was, I think he came up as like a voice reference that we thought was cool.
Right.
And he said, "Oh, I think we're mutuals on Twitter because of a board game convention thing that we both went to." And then we hit him up through Twitter DMs and asked if he was interested. So that
Amazing.
was yeah. Rich is a big board game guy, and he was excited about the idea. But
Cool.
yeah, that's where we got those two. Yep.
And when you completed it, in your view, was it kind of like this is a sort of one and done with the story? You weren't kind of
Yeah.
thinking,
We
this
had no
has
idea.
potential. Yeah.
No, I think we pretty deliberately thought this is the end of this story.
Yeah.
We're all people who, I mean, as much as I think almost everyone on the team had worked on a bunch of franchise things in the past and liked them. We had people who worked on stuff at Telltale, which is only franchise stuff, but then also some people on our team had come from the BioShock series, and some people had worked at EA and Double Fine on a bunch of different things. But a thing that I always like is a story where the world it takes place in is only the size it needs to be to tell that exact story. Like the
Right.
one that I always think about in the adventure game space from when I grew up is Full Throttle, the Tim Schafer
Oh
game.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that is
yeah,
a
yeah.
game that feels like it takes place in some version of real life, but also, and it has little tendrils of sort of world building that go off into the distance, but it really, really feels like the entire world of that game is what you see. Like they didn't the it feels like the needs of the story were the thing that made the world as big as it was, and then
Yeah.
it stops. And you could do a Full Throttle too, I guess. Multiple people tried,
I think
but it
Tim
really
wanted to at one point, but yeah.
I'm sure he did, and the Curse of Monkey Island people did, and
Yes.
I feel like and then the Escape from Monkey Island people did. Many people tried. There were many Full Throttle twos, but that game, it was one of the first ones that I had the conscious feeling of, oh, this world, even though it's really evocative, and this story, they just it just exists as its own little piece. And I think with Firewatch, that was the thing that we liked. I mean, it takes place in a year that is real, in a very, very specific part of the Earth that is real, but there was no feeling of what's the Firewatch World Bible say about what happens 10 years from now, or
Yeah.
what is it? Yeah, it's just its own thing.
Yeah, and I assume still the case. You wouldn't really have an interest in like doing a sequel or even like a, I don't know. I've seen people be like, "Hey, what about Delilah's point of view?" But I
I
don't
mean, sure.
really. Yeah,
Who knows? I mean,
yeah,
you never know what you make before you die. But
of course.
there's not like there was never like a grand Firewatch
No,
trilogy planned.
no.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised if there was, but yeah, it's an I think it's again, it just counts to how much people loved being in that world that they kind of wanted, more
yeah,
content from it, and were
of course.
interested in it. I mean, as I don't, you may not have much of a clue about this either, but I will just ask because I was interested in. I know at one point there was kind of an interest in creating like Firewatch the movie as well, and I don't know if
Mhm.
you know much if that's still a thing or
I mean, anything could happen at any time,
yeah,
but we were really excited when there was interest in a Firewatch movie, and we've poked at it to various levels of involvement, especially Sean, the writer of the game. But we've always kind of known it's cool to be asked, but
yeah,
odds that anything ever happens are functionally zero. So it's been an interesting thing to learn that when people say, "Oh, well, there's always something happening in the background," there literally always is, but
yeah,
it is actually nothing. Like there's always an email thread going somewhere with someone about something, but that doesn't mean anything in terms of the odds of anything ever happening going up.
yeah. I think that I expected as much, but I was like, I'll just if you happen to.
I'm here to
Um,
confirm in real time. No, I'm not.
well, on that note, and this is something
Mhm.
that people always ask, and I'm sure you're like, well, listen, there's just not much more we could say about this, but in the Valley of the Gods, Jake, I
Yeah.
have to ask about it. What is happening with that? Is are we ever going to see that?
I mean, I would say that its status remains the same as it did the last time that anyone said anything about it, which was now many, many years ago. Most of the team who was working on that game ended up sort of splitting apart, and a bunch of us worked on Half-Life Alyx, and a
Yeah.
handful of us women worked on other Valve projects that were going at the time. Some people ended up working on what became some of the software on Steam Deck, or on Steam itself, and a couple of other games. But like, yeah, a bunch of our work during that time, you can see it in Half-Life Alyx. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's where a lot of us went.
You've worked on and been a part of some fantastic projects. Obviously, Firewatch, but as you say as well, the Walking Dead. So many really interesting projects. Tales of Monkey Island as well. Um,
Yeah.
just really evocative, strong games with such strong storytelling. And we kind of seem to be, at a fork in the road now with kind of the games industry and how it uses AI, whether it should use AI.
Hmm.
I just wondered from a personal point of view, what are your thoughts as a storyteller, as someone who works in particularly kind of narratively strong games?
Uh, I mean, I don't know. I've personally never used it for
Yeah,
that. I don't. I To me, the fun of making a thing is doing the part where you do the work and make the thing and have the ideas and get better at it. At just that doing that part of your job and sort of topping your own previous ideas or exciting yourself. And I do think there are a bunch of interesting applications for AI as like a tool and as a thing that human beings have created, but as a way of shortcutting the part where you get to excite yourself by figuring out ideas and making different things connect by having a computer make them connect for you. Like, that's just pretty fundamentally unexciting to me personally. I don't get it. That again, that's not to say that if you listed literally every single thing that an AI tool could do, I would go no to every single one of them. But like
Yeah.
in the specific space of the work that I have done in narrative design on games, like the fun of it is doing it.
Yeah.
That's it. And even at Telltale, I'm I guess fortunate that I've never been under the gun enough that I've felt the pressure to have a computer somehow shortcut the work for me. But just yeah, like I would I would find that so personally unfulfilling. Like
Yeah.
the fun part is making the stuff connect, and I think that the selling point of a lot of these tools are they'll make the stuff connect. So that's why I got a brain.
Yeah. um, do you still get much time to play games? As them any that you've really enjoyed recently? What was
I
that
play
look?
what it's I play so many fewer games than I would like to
I
play, and
know.
that has been true for quite a long time. So like I have like I still like my favorite genres of games are kind of the ones that they were as a kid. I'm sorry to say, which means a lot of adventure games, platformers, and
I
single
mean, just
player first person shooters. Yeah,
I
but
play adventure games all the time, so don't
I know, but like I have the Drifter and Station to Station just sitting
Oh
on my Steam Deck, but I
yes.
haven't played them. The last thing that I played that really grabbed me was probably Blueprints, which is now a
Oh,
while ago. Which shows that I haven't been playing games for about like I haven't been playing enough stuff like in the last half of a year. But yeah,
but I'm well. I think with blueprints, you can just keep coming back to it, though. So I mean, that's the
you
the
can.
beauty of it, really. I mean, I think I've got about 100 hours in that game, but yes, that's maybe more points to my addictive nature. I don't know.
Sure.
um, but I mean, I guess I'll leave it on just this thought, I suppose, because you brought up sort of blueprints and but also
Mhm.
like stations to station drifter. Particularly now, it feels like we see, we used to have these kind of very clear idea of like, oh, adventure games, they're like these point and click kind of quite traditional style games with like this
Mhm.
really interesting story. It feels like that's opened out so much now. I mean, I was looking at last
Mhm.
year, it seems to be such a strong year for storytelling. I suppose, what are your thoughts on just kind of how many ways there are to tell a story now, even with blueprints, which a lot of people will just say, "Oh, it's a puzzle game," but actually, there's
Oh, it's not. No way.
it's no,
I mean,
no,
it is. I mean, in some ways, it is a puzzle game that just has a bunch of stuff
yeah,
hidden around it non-linearly. But also, that's true
yeah,
of a lot of games. Like that's
mm,
original text adventures are literally that, right? I mean,
mm.
but this. Sorry, that sounded like I was oversimplifying blueprints.
Oh
No,
no, I don't think anyone can
God,
oversimplify
no,
blueprints.
that's literally not possible. You can't. It's that game is. That game's good. Um, I don't know if I can have any sort of complicated reaction to it. I generally just think it rules. It's great. I mean, when I first got on the internet, it was around the beginning of the web in the mid 90s. And everyone is old and the internet has been around for too long for this to be true. But for like the first decade of the internet, it was very easy to sort of see who was whom almost literally by what was the first thing you typed into the first search engine you got to when
Mm.
you first found the internet. And for me, it was just Monkey Island. And then I ended up falling into a bucket of fans of old LucasArts adventure games. But so I was like a lot of people online for sort of the doldrums years when everyone said that adventure games were dead, which also in
Mm.
hindsight was never true at all.
Nope.
Like the time between even like the big ones like Grim Fandango and The Longest Journey is like no time. But
Hmm.
anyway, it did feel. I mean, what am I even saying? To me, it's actually really just felt, in hindsight, like all that we've done since from the 90s till now is watch as like the definition of what a narrative based game is, or even an adventure game or games with story. Watching the role that story plays and how players interact with the story of games just get broader and broader and more interesting. And like,
Mm. Yeah.
I don't know, there's nothing not exciting about that. I know that's a boring answer because it's just like, oh, everything's cool, but like the variety of stuff that you can play, whether you want to engage purely with sort of a traditional, it's a story and there's some puzzles, or I just sort of want to go through a narrative, or just other games that increasingly incorporate narrative or are narrative and sort of like vibes forward, even if they have a bunch of mechanics. Like it's just cool.
Yeah.
That's so boring. I'm sorry. I don't have a cool take. I don't have any grand theories about any of this stuff
No,
other
I think
than
it's cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
it's just
sorry.
no. I think that's no, because I was just struck by. I chatted to Ron Gilbert recently when he's obviously brought out this very different style game, Death by Scrolling, and he was sort of saying, I don't really want to make point and clicks. I just want to make narrative based games, and it's almost like, should we just be calling it that now, or is there still a place to say adventure games, and kind of what does that mean? I suppose when we've got the
Oh
you
man.
know yeah. And it doesn't have to be you that decides this, but I was just interested on your take.
No, that just gets, it's funny, like working at Telltale, that company had a pretty like tangible evolution from doing very
Yeah,
traditional point and clicks, even though they were 3D and very stripped down by comparison to like the sort of 90s heyday pixel art stuff. It was still like a mouse clicks on stuff. You click the little backpack and your inventory pops open. You have dialogue trees and inventory, and those are both sort of a little discrete web of lock and key solutions to get through a thing. And then by the end of their existence, they made basically the most expensive visual novels that existed. Like that's how, I mean, with a little bit of walking around in between, and occasionally maybe depending on the game, you would punch a guy by sort of moving a cursor over their head and pressing X. And I worked on that during that evolution. Like Walking Dead season one was a really deliberate choice to move away from some of the trappings of point and click adventure game. It was never designed to like say this is better, but it was like we wanted everyone to get to the end of that game, and that was not saying games where a puzzle challenges you are worse, or that really difficult puzzles are good or bad. We're all people who still love those, and a bunch of those people continue to make that kind of game afterwards. But with The Walking Dead at Telltale, it was very much like, could we make a game that was narrative heavy and still felt like you were in the world and playing as those characters, but the impediments to progress existed in your head instead of the game just saying no every time the next exciting thing was going to happen. If it didn't cross its arm and say, first you must solve my riddle or defeat my devious maze. But where am I going with this? Oh, and then I mean with Firewatch, it was kind of for us, it was walking a little bit even further down that path of, can we take the things that we liked about adventure games, which were being in a world full of things to discover by walking around through them, and as you progress, you gain the tools and knowledge to slowly uncover more of the world and uncover more of the mystery. Can we have a huge amount of interactive dialogue that lets you both sort of probe at things and learn more about the characters that you inhabit the world with, but at the same time, we didn't want to do anything that was a puzzle.
yeah.
But then now, actually, gosh, I should have a better thesis on all of this, but
No, it's. I mean, it's. I
I'm
think
trying
it's
to
a
figure out.
difficult one. Yeah, but it's just something to talk through almost. Really, I don't think any. I don't think there is a definitive answer. But yeah, it's.
No, I mean, I don't know how much this is adventure game chat because I could just go off on a jag for 700 billion hours about this. But
Yes.
like my like one personal kind of weird opinion that I have is that one of the things that people who are not big adventure game players react to when they find themselves bouncing off an adventure game is that the actual tactile experience of playing an adventure game is significantly less satisfying than a bunch of modern games. Whereas in the 90s, when you play Monkey Island 2 or King's Quest 6 or whatever, they play about the same as every other game that you have on your computer. Um, and I kind of think this is totally just my personal bugbear, so I'm going to complain about it. I think that as the graphics got better in point and click adventure games, they actually kind of got less fun to play because the way that your character responds to you became slower and slower
Yeah.
and more cinematic. And when you go back and play Monkey Island 1 or 2, you click and Guybrush just goes, "Do-do-do-do-do." You press open door, the door is open. Your wishes are granted by the game at an incredibly high rate, which is like totally just kind of a game feel thing. But I played the Thimbleweed Park Dolores free
Oh yeah.
spin-off that Ron Gilbert and was it David Fox that put out? I don't remember who the other person was
I'm not sure,
who
but
worked on
yeah, I
Dolores.
played that as well.
Uh, but it was just a little. It was mostly an experiment in adventure game interaction design, and it an evolution of it. I think ended up being the inputs in Return to Monkey Island.
Yeah.
But Dolores was so snappy and so satisfying to like open the file cabinet, pick a thing up out of your inventory, walk across the screen, open the door. The characters all moved at a very satisfying rate. Everything had little tiny audio visual affordances when you clicked on them. You getting in and out of the interface was very fast. The feeling of saying, I wonder if I can, yes, I can. Like that loop was very tight. And it made me realize, oh, the oldest of these games, especially, I was mostly a LucasArts guy, but especially the really early Scum games were so snappy and so responsive. And the only real thing that you can't account for in those is how much backtracking there is. But even then,
Yes.
your character moves so fast. You can get to a map really fast. And I know that is silly, but then when I got up to you know, like Curse of Monkey Island and Grim Fandango, the characters will start like reaching into their pocket for things, or they'll walk at a
Sure.
realistic speed that looks like a cartoon. It looks beautiful. And then at Telltale, we were actually like criminals about this, where it would get to the point that like you would click on a door, a character would sort of pull their hand out of their pocket, swing the door open, stop and look at it, walk in, a load screen would hit, then the next screen loads, and you see the door open again, and the character walks out of it. And like, that's not playing a game. And that's again not to say that like games shouldn't have they shouldn't, it's not to say the game shouldn't have good graphics or that they shouldn't have a bunch of animation. I'm not saying this is definitely not a
Yeah.
pixel art is the future rant. It's more it playing Dolores especially reminded me that like the specific tightness of interaction design and like game feel is as much a part of an adventure game as it is in other games. And I think that because the core audience doesn't think they want that and never talks about it, like there has been a little bit of a fade out from that. And to like even on the Walking Dead, we tried as hard as we could to have the UI move as quickly out of your way as possible, have your button presses
Mm.
accept themselves as quick as possible, and things like if you're kicking out a window of a car, we wanted it to work as close to a fighting game as possible. So when you press A, like Lee's foot was already going for the door instead of a wind up. Just to kind of, I think, get the game out of your way. It's been interesting seeing other genres that are story heavy eat a little bit of the traditional adventure game space in terms of like this just feels good and it feels modern. And I do think some of it might literally be that. Like there's a bunch of other factors, but anyway, like I said, this is like a tiny micro
Of course.
weird thing that I think about
It's interesting.
too often. But when we went back, I work with the guys at Skunk Ape Games, and we went
Yeah.
and we've been remastering old Telltale games because a bunch of us ended up being able to acquire the Sam and Max games after Telltale turned into a hole in the ground almost 10 years ago now. We're coming up on
Oh, God.
10-year anniversary of Telltale dying is 2 years from now, which is crazy.
Oh,
But one of the things that I did along with Eric Parsons, who was a cinematics and choreography guy who worked on the remasters, was just go through and cut a bunch of that time out. Like,
Right.
I don't think
Yeah.
anyone noticed, but like literally when people go in and out of doors in the Sam & Max remaster, we just wanted it to feel closer in cadence to the old games, not as a desire to make it feel retro, but just like, will this feel more pleasing and will people enjoy it more? And will that help more people actually get to the parts of the game that we actually love? I don't know. This is what does it have to do with your question? I don't. I genuinely
It's
cannot remember at this point. It, I mean, I actually think to zoom all the way out and maybe back in again, my own analogy is crumbling in my hands.
Love
I
it.
think the fact that what story in games is and sort of what mechanical breadth there is, like you can play something like Blueprints or Oberdin,
Yeah.
or even, I mean, if you stretch it way out, things like the Uncharted series, and you're
Yeah.
playing it for the story. I think the fact that there is narrative first, or sort of the narrative and uncovering and interacting with the narrative is the drive of the game. That there's such a huge breadth of that stuff. Actually, kind of makes it okay in my mind for the point and click adventure game to just be the point and click adventure game again. Like
Sure.
I think in the 2000s through 2010s, there was this identity crisis in the adventure game community and even with adventure game developers, where you had stuff like Telltale or Revolution with the Broken Sword games feeling like the only way for the adventure game to survive is to evolve. And like, maybe, but if that was the case, it is now evolved and metastasized out and it's everywhere. And like,
Yeah.
I find it extremely pleasing at this point to hit a classic, like really point and click adventure game and just go, oh, you're just doing that. Like
Yeah.
I,
You're
I think
doing
that
that.
they're in some way, like it's what Dave Gilbert has done with Wadget Eye,
Yep.
and it's what like something like Locomotive or whatever, that you just get it and go, yeah, this is like.
Yeah.
I think that weirdly it feels like, maybe not weirdly, it feels like there's maybe more space for that than there was a decade ago, because there's not a feeling that if you do or don't make a design choice, you're cannibal, you're taking up the air that could be used for some
Uh,
other creative decision or
right. Right.
whatever.
Right.
Like, nah.
Would you ever want to like go back to making sort of a pure adventure game yourself?
Yeah, why not? Who doesn't want to make one of those?
Great answer. Well, on that, I'm going to end it on that because I think that's the best way to end it. But
Just to be clear, I'm not doing
no,
that anytime soon,
it was a
or maybe ever.
theoretical. No, it was a theoretical question there, but
Sure.
yeah. Um, but thank you, Jake. I really appreciate you having a chat with me. I know, obviously, much time has passed since Firewatch came out, but it's great to see so many people still talking about it. And obviously, whatever you're up to, I know we can't really talk about that, but look forward to finding out what it is at some point and seeing more of what you do, because you're obviously a very talented guy and have created some just really beloved franchises and games, which we all love.
So thanks. Love to create a beloved franchise.